What if I told you that your life savings could become worthless tomorrow? Not in some distant dystopian future, but right now in the modern world. In 2019, Lebanese citizens went to sleep as middle-class professionals. They woke up unable to access their bank accounts. Within 2 years, their currency had lost over 90% of its value. Doctors, engineers, families who'd saved for decades wiped out overnight. This isn't ancient history. This is our world. And if you think it can't happen to you, you're making the same mistake people have made for thousands of years right before they lost everything. Stay with me for the next 15 minutes, because I'm going to show you the patterns that repeat before every financial collapse, and more importantly, how everyday people have protected themselves when their entire economy fell apart. Welcome to Finance Wealth Money, where we cut through the noise and show you what actually works when it comes to building and protecting wealth. Today we're diving into something most financial channels won't touch: what happens when entire currency systems collapse, and how ordinary people either survive or get crushed. I've analyzed financial disasters spanning 2,000 years, and I found something disturbing. The same patterns keep repeating. But I also found something hopeful. The people who understand these patterns don't just survive, they thrive. If you want to be one of them, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this might be the most important video you watch this year. The myth of permanence. Let me start with the truth bomb. Currency collapse isn't the exception, it's the norm. Think about it. The Roman denarius, the Byzantine solidus, French assignats, Confederate dollars, the Weimar mark, the Zimbabwean dollar. Every single one was considered rock solid by the people using it, until the day it wasn't. Here's what most people don't understand. Money isn't a physical thing. Money is collective belief. It's trust in a system. And when that trust breaks, your paper notes become just that, paper. Let me give you a perfect example. For over 700 years, the Byzantine gold solidus was the dollar of the medieval world. Merchants from London to Baghdad accepted it without question. It was backed by one of history's most powerful empires. But then Byzantine emperors started doing what every desperate government does. They began reducing the gold content. Just a little at first. Nobody noticed. Then a little more, and more. Within a few generations, the coin that had been 24-karat gold was barely gold at all. And when merchants realized this, trust evaporated. The currency that had survived barbarian invasions and plagues couldn't survive its own government's dishonesty. The people who lost everything, those who kept holding the coins, trusting the empire, the people who preserved their wealth, those who'd quietly converted to pure gold, land, or other tangible assets before the collapse became obvious. This is the first critical lesson. Governments always debase their currency when they're desperate. Always. And by the time everyone knows it's happening, it's too late to protect yourself. The Black Death Paradox. Now let's talk about something counterintuitive. How disasters can create opportunity. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death killed up to half of Europe's population. Cities turned into graveyards. Entire villages disappeared. It was apocalyptic. But here's the twist. For those who survived, the economic landscape completely flipped. Before the plague, land was expensive and labor was cheap. Peasants worked for pennies and had zero bargaining power. But when half the workforce died overnight, suddenly labor became scarce and valuable. Survivors could demand wages their parents never dreamed of. Abandoned estates sat empty. Fields went unplowed, and anyone with even modest savings could buy land that would have cost a fortune just years before. This same pattern played out during COVID-19. Supply chains collapsed. Governments printed trillions. And while millions struggled to pay rent, those with cash reserves bought real estate and stocks at pandemic prices, assets that doubled in value within 2 years. I'm not saying this is fair. I'm saying this is the pattern. Crises redistribute wealth. They always have. They punish the unprepared and reward the positioned. The lesson? Cash reserves during a crisis aren't just defensive. They're offensive. When everyone else is forced to sell, that's when generational wealth is built. When banks fail, let's talk about something that terrifies me, the myth of too big to fail. In the 1340s, Florence was the financial capital of Europe. The Bardi and Peruzzi banking families were giants. Think medieval J.P. Morgan. They financed kings. They funded wars. They were untouchable until they weren't. When King Edward III of England defaulted on his war debts, these megabanks collapsed almost instantly. Depositors who trusted these institutions lost everything. Regular citizens saw their life savings vanish because they believed size meant safety. Sound familiar? In 2008, Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old institution, collapsed in a weekend. In 2023, Silicon Valley Bank failed so fast that people couldn't withdraw their money before it was seized. And then there's Lebanon, which I mentioned at the start. In 2019, Lebanese banks simply froze accounts. People literally couldn't access their own money. The government called it capital controls. The people called it theft. Here's what you need to understand. When you deposit money in a bank, you're not storing it in a vault. You're making an unsecured loan to that institution. And in a crisis, that institution's survival matters more to them than your savings. The people who escaped the Lebanese collapse, those who diversified internationally, held physical precious metals, or kept significant cash outside the banking system. I'm not saying empty your bank account tomorrow. I'm saying understand that banks are not vaults. They're businesses, and businesses fail. The paper money trap. Let's travel to America during the Civil War, because this is a story most Americans don't know and desperately need to learn. Both the Union and Confederacy faced the same problem. How do you fund a massive war? The answer: print money. The Union issued greenbacks, paper currency not backed by gold, just by government promises. The Confederacy issued graybacks. Both were experiments in faith-based economics. In the North, inflation was bad. In the South, it was catastrophic. By 1865, Confederate inflation had reached thousands of %. A soldier's monthly pay couldn't buy a single meal. Families carried wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread, if they could find bread. When the war ended, Confederate currency was literally worthless. People used it as wallpaper. A lifetime of savings for millions of Southerners simply evaporated. Who survived? Those holding land, gold, food, livestock, anything real. And here's the gut punch. This wasn't ancient Rome or medieval Europe. This was America, 160 years ago. Your own country has already experienced total currency collapse. The pattern gets even clearer when we look at revolutionary France in the 1790s. The government seized church lands and issued the assignat, paper money supposedly backed by this confiscated property. At first, people trusted it. It was backed by something real, right? But then the government started printing more and more and more. Within a few years, the assignat was worthless. Farmers refused to accept it. Parisians rioted for bread. The revolution literally ate itself. The survivors, those who'd converted paper into tangible goods before everyone else figured it out. This is a universal truth. When governments get desperate, they print. And when they print, paper money dies. Every single time. The modern playbook. Now let's bring this into our world, because the patterns haven't stopped. They've accelerated. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis showed us how interconnected collapse works. Thailand borrowed heavily in US dollars, confident in its stability. When their currency peg broke, those dollar debts became unplayable overnight. The crisis spread like wildfire. Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea all fell like dominoes. Ordinary people saw their savings cut in half, then in half again. Their mortgages doubled in cost while their wages collapsed. Who got hurt? Regular citizens. Who profited? International investors who bought Asian assets at fire sale prices. This is the harsh reality of global finance. Your local collapse is someone else's opportunity. Fast forward to 2008. American homeowners lost their properties while Wall Street got bailouts. Then in 2020, trillions in stimulus inflated stock and housing prices while wages stayed flat. The wealthy got wealthier. Everyone else fell further behind. And it's still happening. Right now, Argentina is experiencing hyperinflation. Turkey's currency has collapsed. Even in stable countries, inflation is eroding purchasing power faster than wages can keep up. The question isn't if the next crisis will come, it's when and whether you'll be ready. The survival blueprint. So after all these disasters, what actually works? History gives us clear answers, and they're not what most financial advisors will tell you. First, don't trust paper promises. Whether it's currency, bonds, or bank statements, paper only holds value as long as institutions honor it, and institutions break promises when survival is on the line. Second, real assets matter. Throughout history, land, precious metals, and productive property have preserved wealth through collapses. They can't be printed. They can't be digitally deleted. They exist independent of any government or bank. Third, liquidity is power. Having cash reserves during a crisis lets you buy assets from desperate sellers. Every major wealth transfer in history happened when the prepared bought from the pressured. Fourth, avoid debt in currencies you don't control. This destroyed Thailand in 1997 and countless others throughout history. If your income is in one currency but your debt is in another, you're one crisis away from ruin. Fifth, skills trump savings. In every collapse, people still need food, repairs, medical care, and essential services. Those who can provide value never stay poor long. The baker, the craftsman, the farmer, they survive when paper pushers don't. Sixth, diversification isn't optional. Don't keep all your wealth in one country, one currency, one asset class, or one institution. When one system fails, you need others to fall back on. But here's the deepest truth. Wealth protection isn't just about what you own. It's about how you think. The people who survive collapses aren't lucky. They're aware. They see the cracks before they become chasms. They act while others are still comfortable. They understand that every system eventually fails, and they position themselves accordingly. Look, I know this is heavy. Nobody wants to think about their money becoming worthless or their banks closing. But ignorance isn't protection. Hope isn't a strategy. And trusting that it can't happen here is exactly what people said before every single collapse in history. The good news, you're still early. You have time to learn, prepare, and position yourself. That's why I created Finance Wealth Money, to give you the knowledge that mainstream finance won't teach you. If this video opened your eyes, do two things right now. First, subscribe and hit the notification bell. I'm releasing more content on wealth protection strategies that actually work in crisis conditions. Second, drop a comment telling me, what's your biggest fear about a financial crisis, and what's the first step you're taking to protect yourself? Remember, history doesn't repeat exactly, but the patterns do. And those who learn from the past don't have to repeat its mistakes. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay aware, stay prepared, and keep building wealth that lasts. This is Finance Wealth Money, signing off.